you like flash attacks? Do you like trying to do a move and getting interrupted because it takes 2 minutes to wind up? Do you like, dare I say, anime? Then you will probably like this video, because in Elden Ring they took the weapon arts from Dark Souls 3 and made them better and most importantly, way cooler. So I will try to beat the game and all the main bosses using only them, to see if it's doable. And I tried making Raiden from Metal Gear as my character, but it turned out like a generic K-pop star. I think the samurai is the best starting class, because the weapon art is both strong and cool looking. I tried it a bit against a dummy opponent and we can see that the damage is great up to the point we run out of focus. After that, not only we deal poor damage, but it also costs way more stamina, so we will always want to have some focus flasks with us or else we basically can't fight. That's why before going for the first boss we want to upgrade our flasks. We don't need to go overboard with it and run to the plateau just yet, but we take all the materials we can find around us. In our travels we meet a pot warrior that utters the iconic sentence, "Help me, step tarnished, I'm stuck." I think we would be mechanically incompatible, so we can weapon skill him out of the hole. And we help him like you can help me by subscribing to the channel, just with less heat. We proceed with this quest a bit by meeting him in a cave where nobody's sure how he ended up in it, since he can't go through either of the doors that lead to the room he's in, but this is a FromSoft classic since the Dark Souls 2 times. And we will need him later because he will give us a very good talisman. And after upgrading our weapon a bit, we can do our classic challenge hardness test against Margit. Our main problem here is that the weapon art works by first putting the weapon in the sheath and then we attack, so the wind up part of the move is pretty slow and we can be staggered out of it. And when it ends, it's again a bit slow because we motion getting the blood off the blade. That is really cool, but it takes time. That said, our damage is insanely high, so we just have to wait for a fairly big opening and then swing. Sometimes he has fast and unexpected attacks that will stagger us out of a move, but since they are faster than expected, they won't deal much damage. We can only attack 6 times per full focus bar, but like we don't need a lot more than 6 attacks to take him down. Also obviously, since it's weapon skills only, we can't riposte if we stagger. Our weapon deals bleed damage, even though since we attack quite slowly it's not very good, but it's still enough to take down the big dragon and get the 3 levels. It takes a while, but with a bit of samurai editing magic it will only be a moment. I took the Bloody Slash weapon art from a random knight that is very cool and very edgy, and I used it to clear Stormhill Castle. It works well if you have to cut down falcons, but since it also damages us and it was nerfed to the ground in one of the first patches, it's probably not good enough. I tried it against Godric and it still looks cool at least. We stick with our tried and true unsheath for now, that unexpectedly works the same as in the Margit fight, only that Godric has a bit more HP and slower attacks. While we cut him enough, we can understand Ashes of War a bit better. Every one of them is in a category, like Kin, Quality, Poison, Cold and others. And by equipping them we can either have our weapons scale with that specific type, as in Sacred Weapons will deal half physical and half holy damage and will scale with Faith, but we can also stick with the original weapon scaling with no drawbacks. Does this mean that we can use every weapon art without caring about Arcane, Faith and Intelligence? Well, not quite, but more on that later. The Grafted is now the Graftee, and behind him we can get into Liurnia, where instead of going straight for Rhea Lucaria, we want to head to the west and make our way into the Caria Manor for 2 main reasons. First, we can defeat a beetle to get the Hoarfrost Stomp weapon art, and then we traverse the manor to meet Ranni, but only after defeating Loretta. I got the Stomp with me, that does frost build up, but I forgot that since Loretta is a ghost we can't frost her, and the damage is absolutely garbage. I later on figured out why, but at the time I thought it was simply because they nerfed it too much, so I came back with the Unsheath to defeat her. But at this point Unsheath is definitely stale, and if you can listen to me it means you are still watching the video, but I am not upholding my part of the deal, showing cool attacks, so we'll change them more often from now on. Also, Loretta gives us less runes than Margit. I get that she isn't very hard, but come on. We came here to join Ranni's ranks, because after doing that, Ishii will sell us an emblem that lowers the focus cost of skills by a whopping 25%, basically a must-wear in this run. Now that Godric is dead, Rogier will show up at the round table, and he will sell us a couple of interesting weapon arts. Specifically, Glintstone Pebble, that works like the spell but has a very short range, and Spinning Weapon, that well, makes our weapon spin. We take Glintstone Pebble with us to get another weapon art, because it's on a beetle in Sellia that will teleport around, and having a ranged attack helps out a lot. The new weapon art is Double Slash, that I'm pretty sure is taken straight from Sekiro, and we try it out in the academy. The damage isn't very high per swing, but with the first button press we attack twice, and with the second we have 3 attacks, so the overall damage per second is quite good. In addition to that, since we are still using the katana, every hit will deal bleed build up, so it's going to be much easier to trigger now. The focus cost is very low, so we can easily spam it, and we basically don't have to worry about focus flasks. It's a very committal move though, in that once we start attacking it will take a long time before we can dodge again, because we can't interrupt the move mid-sequence, so when we use it we need to either be well positioned or ready to get hit in the face. Thankfully I played a lot of Monster Hunter. The low focus cost is very useful against Renalla, because we have to hit 3 scholars before we can damage her, and I almost got her done in one cycle, but I ran out of stamina. Phase 2 begins, and there are many things I could say about this fight and if the weapon art is good, but saying that it lasted less than 30 seconds is probably enough. This happens because every hit we do will stagger her, and the following hit will connect before her stagger ends, so she is basically locked in place until the game will give her infinite poise and she flies away. A pretty normal things that games do so that you can't kill enemies in a single combo. And wow, this actually looked like a Sekiro fight against a weak enemy. Too bad I can't riposte. Here I found out a neat thing about weapon skills. If we take a magic one, like Glintstone Pebble, and we use the base weapon scaling, the skill will still deal magic damage, and the damage will scale with intelligence, so we can't quite take every weapon art we find and use it without thinking about the build. And that's why Frost Stomp sucked against Loretta, she has a very high magic resistance. That said, Spinning Weapon, that is in the magic section, doesn't deal magic damage, and thus it doesn't scale with intelligence, and like it makes sense, it's just our weapon spinning, but this means that it's not per category, but it has to be considered individually for each skill. We want to fight Radahn now, but first I went to the plateau so that the festival near Radahn's castle will begin, and I also went to the Volcano Manor. This is really important, because if we don't, we won't be able to progress in Alexander's quest. For the Star Scourge fight I brought with me Spinning Weapon, because it looks goofy enough to be fun against a giant mad guy on top of a small horse. The weapon skill isn't actually that bad, because it attacks really fast, making it quite easy to bleed enemies, and since Radahn has many HP, the bleed is especially effective here. Another useful feature is that we can slowly walk around while the weapon is spinning, and that allows us to move to the side just enough to avoid many of his follow-up attacks, and we need that because the skill lasts so long that he can finish an attack sequence and start another one while we are still spinning. Also, I hope you know that if it wasn't for the MCA and stuff, this whole fight would be with me silent and you spin me around like a record by Dead or Alive absolutely blasting. This is what they took from us. Radahn falls and we can now go to Nokron, but first we want to talk to Alexander here and then at the foot of the Volcano Manor while he's bathing in lava. Since we went to the manor early, we skipped a step in his quest, where he would be stuck in a hole in Liurnia, and it's really important we skip that, because else we would have to unstuck him by throwing an oil pot that will deal 1 damage, and since it's not a weapon art, we can't use it. Now that we talked to him in the lava, we are almost done with his quest, and the next step will be the last. Here I met Vaik, that definitely had the best weapon skill between us two, and then we go down in Nokron, where after fighting the coolest samurai I can think of that unfortunately forgot his blade, we can take an item for running. Also we got the pot hat from Alexander. In the manor, if we go to the upper floor, we get invaded by a guy that, when defeated, will drop a pizza cutter. Since you could probably tell I'm Italian, I also have a 10% damage bonus with the weapon, so I decided to try it out against Astel by proceeding with Ranni's quest. And like, it sucks. It should bleed enemies really easily, and I don't know if they nerfed it or what, but the bleed build up simply isn't there. And even after ditching the weapon, I still had some problems against Astel, probably because I'm not supposed to fight it just yet, but also because his head is always a bit too high in the air. So I went back to the overworld, because in Chelid we can find Fort Gael, in which, if we defeat the lion in the courtyard, we get Lion's Claw, a physical but pretty cool weapon art. And I used it against Astel, but it still wasn't doing enough damage. When I realized something, this skill can be used on all sorts of weapons, and it always takes the same time to do. And since the damage comes from the weapon's attack rating, if we could find a thing too big to be called a sword, too thick, too heavy and too rough, more like a large hunk of iron, we could deal a lot more damage with the same attack speed, and I think I know just the thing. Now the fight is much easier, our damage is great and the weapon art has good range, so we can hit its thick skull reliably. It can still be annoying, because if Astel decides to do the gravity wave move 6 times in a row, there's nothing we can do, and the weapon art has some super armor, meaning that we won't get staggered during it by most attacks, but it also means that we can get killed by using it at the wrong time and getting hit 2 or 3 times, because if we don't get knocked to the ground we don't have any invincibility frames, so we need to be a bit careful and not overuse it. It only takes 4 or 5 hits to stun it, and even though we can't riposte, we can still hit 2 more times with the additional damage, so taking it down won't be that big of a deal now. In my quest to deal more damage, I went to take another weapon art that we can take by defeating Commander O'Neill, and for sure we could take him down from a distance with any longbow skill, but that would be really boring, not only for you, the spectator, but also for me having to do it. So I decided to get my hands dirty. If we don't get the Scarlet Rot, the fight is really easy. We are at a high enough level that we can't just trade hits with him. When I said we got a weapon art from him, I sort of lied, because we actually get his weapon that has a unique skill, called the Relling Standard, that gives us an insane 20% damage and damage reduction buff for 30 seconds, and I went to try it out against the Regal Ancestor, that we just have to light a couple of flames to fight, and I would say these two things combined are pretty good, and this remembrance was basically free. But we can deal even more damage, and I decided to try it out against the Draconic Tree Sentinel that we have to defeat to enter the capital. First of all, we can put Hoarfrost Stomp on a dagger, because it will deal a good amount of frost damage, and spam it a bit to freeze our opponent, so that he will take increased damage for 60 seconds. Then, since the Relling Standard is a body buff, we can use a resin on our weapon while the buff is still active, and with all that we will be able to basically delete the Sentinel from the game. Okay, I thought it was going to be more damage, but like the Sentinel is a heavily armored enemy, so 1300 points doesn't look that bad. Also, my weapon is plus 14 at this point, and it has been so long since I played an Elden Ring run that wasn't a challenge that I have no idea what it's supposed to be. So you can tell me in the comments if I am spot on or if I am insane because it's too upgraded or not upgraded enough. Either way, the Sentinel is dead. Not much to do inside the capital, aside from getting a huge hammer, using a lot of materials to upgrade it, and getting a weapon art that should heal us when it hits, only to realize that we never have enough poise to sustain a hit, and that the damage isn't even comparable to a simple Lion's Claw. So I wanted to get all fancy, but we only needed what we already had to defeat weak Godfrey. It won't be as easy with Morgoth though, because he loves jumping around and dodging, and I'm afraid that a slow attack like the claw will be too clunky. Fortunately, Fort Gael comes to our aid once again, because right in front of it we can defeat a beetle that will give us Flame of the Redmanes, an Ash of War that I never even heard before doing research for this run, and that I will for sure include in all my future runs, if I am allowed to use skills and it isn't nerfed, that is. Since it's a fire attack, we want to get the tier that gives us plus 20% fire damage dropped by this avatar, and you are probably looking at this thinking that, yeah, it's a 3, it makes sense that it takes a lot of fire damage, but this isn't even the strong part of the attack. With a big enemy like Morgoth, it only takes 2 hits to stun him, and that's straight up insane even if we can't riposte. On top of that, the damage is absolutely good. It attacks pretty fast, and it has a wide and long range, and it can be used on all melee armaments, so nothing to complain about. Well, I'd like to complain that it doesn't involve the weapon. It looks like we either spew or shoot fire from our hands while holding the weapon, and it doesn't make much sense, but it's so good that we wouldn't swap it for anything. About that, behind Morgoth we can go in the Forbidden Lands, and after freezing a bit we will be invaded. If we defeat the invader, and we have unlimited tries to do it, we will get the famous, or probably infamous, Rivers of Blood, whose weapon art is not only cool, but really good. I forgot to do Fia's quest up until now, so we have to defeat the gargoyles with the flame. That I thought was going to be easier, but we still have enough strength to take one down before the other one joins, so it's not really a problem. And then I decided to change build a bit to take the rivers out for a spin, and yeah, these enemies are humanoid, so it works very well with them, and they aren't that strong, but it cuts through them like butter. Like I even killed one that I wasn't even focusing, he was just there incidentally. But let's try it out against a proper boss fight, and since Fia's quest is over, we can face Fortisax. The weapon art is especially good here, because it takes additional damage to his head, but it's really hard to hit, and the skill has a long enough range to hit it reliably. Well, almost reliably. He will still move it around randomly, so it's not like it doesn't suck. It sucks less. Fortisax can bleed since he has blood? I think that's how this works. So our damage is still really good, because this weapon skill bleed build up is really high, and like it costs a bit more focus than we are used to, but it's probably the strongest thing we can put our hands on. So why not mix the two strongest things we have? We can go and meet Commander Niall in Castle Sol, and this fight is quite hard, mostly because as soon as the fight begins, he will summon two knights that help him out and will probably kill us, but we can try to take them all out at the same time with the flames. The problem with this fight is that everything is really unreliable. Sometimes we can spam the flame attack and stagger them all with no problem. Sometimes they walk a bit too much to the left or right and we miss them. When they are defeated, he will go into phase 2. Sometimes immediately, sometimes after fighting for a bit, and we usually stagger the commander with 3 flame attacks, but sometimes it takes like 6, and some other times I swear I could stagger him with only 2. A good strategy I found was, after we dodge an attack, we can use the flames, and when we stagger him we can switch to the Rivers of Blood, because with just 2 weapon arts we will bleed him, and we have just enough time to dodge away after that. Here what happens is that sometimes he will miss us after he jumps down and we start attacking, and some other times he will hit us straight in the face. Sometimes he will stand still and attack, and sometimes he will reposition before doing the same attack, and if you get hit here we will get staggered out of the weapon skill. But at the end of the day we only need to stagger and bleed him twice, so it may take some time, but we will eventually get him. This allows us to get into the secret Frozen Lands, but first we want to fight the Fire Giant. Phase 1 was nothing too special. We can't attack from the horse, but we just have to climb down and use the Lion's Claw, since he's resistant to fire. I actually didn't look it up, but I assumed that the Fire Giant is resistant to fire. But after half HP, phase 2 begins, and I had an elaborate plan, where I had to chase down what a painting is representing by falling off a cliff I didn't even know was there, and then crafting some bleed arrows to take him down with a cool weapon skill that literally makes it rain, but it sucks because the giant is too big and it always misses him, so we had to close it out with the Rivers of Blood. And like, this weapon is good. Honestly, it's probably too good, and every time I want to try something cool, I always resort to using it. So, new rule, I won't use it anymore, because else it would be beating the game with just this weapon art. Melina tells us what her favorite Eurobeat song is. Okay, this joke is impossible to get. There is an Eurobeat song called I'm Burning Up For You. And we end up in Farum Azula, where after jumping on some space debris, we have to fight the Godskin duo, a fight that is hard to defeat without a plan. Unless your plan is using a Spirit Ash, in that case it's easy. They are weak to sleep, so there is one weapon art that comes to our aid. In the secret Frozen Lands there are some enemies reenacting the Coens brothers hit movie Fargo, and if we manage to find them we can open the chest in the back to get Trina's torch, that deals sleep damage and has a weapon art that does sleep build up, but it doesn't deal damage. I think that the skill doesn't actually do sleep damage, just the flames on the ground. Okay, I honestly have no idea how this works, but if you spam it long enough, one of them will fall asleep, and we just need to do this step once. Now that we are in 1v1, we should be able to defeat them easily without taking too much damage. And to do that, we want to use Lion's Claw, because they are resistant to fire since they can throw flames around. That I would normally call video game logic, but like it makes a little sense. It only takes 3 hits to stagger them and like 6 hits to kill them, but we will have to defeat 4 of them to win. Our damage is high enough that once one of them is sleeping, we will only be fighting them one at a time. And if we manage to kill one before he summons the other one, we will have a 20-second breather before he respawns on his own. And the main problem we'll have will be dying during the weapon art, since they won't be able to stagger us out of it, but they still deal damage. Also, when the Sonic Apostle starts doing his signature move, we can just jump on one of these broken temples and he will miss us. With their defeat, we will get the Black Flame Tornado of War. That is absolutely insane, but it can only be used on pole arms and twin blades. And that includes the Gargoyle Halberd that we can drop by defeating the Gargoyle in Leyndell. Before the next fight though, there is one old friend we have to meet. If we use a couple of keys, we can get to some floating rocks, where we meet Alexander that will challenge us to a duel. If we win, we get a talisman that gives us 15% additional damage on all weapon skills, an obvious inclusion in the run. And to be fair, if we decided to kill Alexander in any moment before now, we could have gotten a talisman that gives us 10% damage increase for skills. But I think that the hardest fights are in the end, so I chose the better talisman, but later. Also, if we lose, we can fight him again. Here we can fight Placidius Axe, a strong optional boss that has the misfortune of being on the other side of the Flame Tornado. We want to start out with Flame of the Redmanes though, because the tornado skill takes a long time to start and we can get staggered while we do it. But obviously if we do it against a stunned boss, we will deal the full damage. Also, they take more damage on the necks, so we want to aim the Flame Sire. The character is shirtless because these weapons weigh too much, and just so we are clear, I'm using the Greatsword because it looks cool, not because it deals more damage. This weapon art does not scale with the attack rating. It only takes 4 flames to stagger them, and I tried playing it cool and stunned them out of the strong explosion attack, but obviously this is a controlled environment and it was calculated. It's not like I survived out of sheer luck. The Art of War deals a total of 5000 damage, that is absolutely insane. And it took a couple of tries more than needed because I wanted to take them down before they could fly away the third time and come down with the lasers. Before fighting Maliketh, I went to clear the Volcano Manor, because we can easily defeat the first boss, since it's just a Godskin Noble, and then we can go and fight Rykard. And for the first time in this channel, we can actually do it as intended with the spear in his arena. Well, almost as intended, because first of all I teleported away to upgrade the weapon, and also because here all the attacks will have the white lasers coming out of them, not just the weapon art, but we only have to dodge a couple of attacks, nothing too crazy. We almost keep him staggered, but not quite. The damage is obviously insane, since this is how you should defeat this gimmick, and it took me more than half the fight to realize that we have a follow-up attack that deals more damage. I guess today we won't be devouring the gods together. Maliketh is next, and the double flame setup works great here, because we can attack fast enough to not get staggered repeatedly. With just 2 casts we can stagger him, and after that we can deal the real damage with the tornado, since he's somewhat resistant to fire. In phase 2 it works mostly the same way, it's just a bit harder to stagger him since he jumps around all the time, but it only takes 1 stagger and a couple more flames to take him down. Gideon is next, and I tried fighting him with Vike's spear that deals madness build-up, but after dying 1000 times I decided to just barbecue him out of the game. Also, he's immune to Death Blight in case you were wondering, like me. We got to the Miquella Zelig tree next, where I dropped a musical instrument that I decided to try against the next boss after jumping on some roofs and dodging mushrooms. This weapon shoots holy bubbles and it looks cool, but it would be really effective only against a very big enemy that gets hit by all of them. Too bad the only big enemy remaining is the final boss that is immune to holy damage. And this would be the second time this video that I tried something fancy against Loretta and I just ended up beating her up with a sword. What can I say, it works really well. Behind her we can reach Malenia, and after a couple of trials, I decided that I will probably fight her later. So to take a break, I went to fight the Lord of Blood, that I feared was going to be really hard, since all our good weapon arts deal fire damage and is resistant to fire. I started out by shooting bubbles, and unexpectedly it's not very effective against a huge monster with a cult that can take blood out of another dimension. And no, I'm not talking about Jared Leto. So, mid-fight I swapped to the greatsword with the Lion's Claw, and after just one hit, all my doubts about the fight being hard disappeared. We can power through his attacks no problem, since we take some damage but not that much, and we will stagger him multiple times during the fight for even more free damage. If during phase 2 we mess up too much, we may die, usually because one attack hits, we bleed, and while we are staggered we get hit again. But if we stay close to him we will take less bleed damage, and we still only need a couple of skills to take him down. In this boss rush, Hoarah is next, and since he takes good fire damage we switched back to the flame without the tornado though, since we just need a fast hitting attack. Here is where the range of the skill shines the most, because he will often dash away and stomp when we try to use it, but he'll still get hit by it. Our damage is really high, since he's supposed to be a tanky boss, and it only takes a couple of hits to stagger him like the rest of them. In addition to that, in both phases he will charge up at half HP, and this is yet another opening where we can just spam attacks. So, if we get a little lucky, we only need to dodge a couple of attacks total in the whole fight. Also, yeah, spells travel from phase 1 to phase 2 and still retain damage. Maybe it wasn't that good of an idea fighting shirtless against someone that spews fire. We only need to fight Malenia now, but we aren't ready yet. And I know, because I realized we weren't ready after like 50 tries. We only need 3 things to beat her, first of which is the Bloodhound Step weapon art, that we can get by defeating this knight, and we want to put it on a dagger. Then we want to go and take the Glintstone Whetblade, that allows us to take our faithful katana and put the double slash weapon art on it with the cold infusion, meaning it does frost damage. And finally, we want a hammer so comically big that it looks like it came straight out of a Tom and Jerry episode. We actually got that like 20 hours ago. With those we can go against Malenia and fight her like the second closest game to Elden Ring, Whack-A-Mole. I don't know where I was trying to go with that joke, but bonking her with a hammer feels really good. We want to have the katana in the offhand, because we will deal the bulk of our damage with the hammer, but if she's frozen, she will take some free damage on the spot and additional damage for the following minute. And it's really easy to freeze her with the multiple hits of the double slash skill, also because she will stagger out of the first 2 with a dash and end up right in the following 3. If only there was a weapon that has the same weapon art, but with more range and that deals like bleed damage, right? Now, hitting her with the hammer is a bit weird, but just because of how her hyper armor works. If she's standing still or in a limited number of attacks, when we hit her she will fall to the ground, where we can easily use the weapon art and hit her again. But we need to be careful, because to avoid her being always on the ground, they made it so that from when she's standing up to the end of her next attack, if she does one right after, we won't be able to stun her or knock her down. So if we run out of stamina or if we use the weapon art too late, we won't be able to dodge and we will get hit, but it does enough damage that doing the second attack is too convenient. Same thing happens if we stun her, and remember that we do stun damage to her only when we hit her while she doesn't have hyper armor. This means that every time she's attacking and we try to hit her, maybe because we dodge behind her back or we see an opening, we can do it, but she won't even flinch, so we need to either be ready to dodge or to just suck up the damage. A thing that comes to our advantage is that at the end of the Lion's Claw animation we are pretty low to the ground, and since most of our initiating attacks are horizontal swipes, we will avoid them even if we are still in the recovering part of the skill, just because they will fly over our head. And this same thing happened in the hardest boss fight in this very same challenge back in Dark Souls 3, so that's pretty cool. What kills us in this fight is, as always, her waterfowl dance, because every time we hit her and knock her down, she may decide to come back up with the dance. We can stagger her out of it, and most of the time we will be recovering from our attack. So in the second slot in the main hand I have a dagger with the Bloodhound Step weapon art that is absolutely insane. and by using it even from really close to her, we can, if not avoid all the damage, at least mitigate most of it. So it's basically mandatory. We want it in the right hand, because if we have a weapon in both hands, the default skill will be the one in the right hand, so we just have to swap to the knife and spam the step. And I know that we could have defeated her with all sort of cool skills and weapons, but I think that smashing her head in with a hammer so big that it takes up 30% of the screen is what's closest to the spirit of this game. Also, if for some reason you're doing this run at home, please just use the Rivers of Blood, it's basically a free win. Only the final boss remains, but unfortunately for them Radagon is weak to fire because of all the burning the air tree stuff, and he gets staggered by just 3 attacks. I mean, he can even be stunned during his cool signature attack, come on. The fish instead is weak to being hit with a giant sword multiple times, like most people I guess, so we don't need much more to win. And with that I'll say that you can beat Elden Ring with only weapon skills, and you can even look pretty cool while doing it. And if you like the video, leave a like or even subscribe. I'll see you next time. Well, you'll see me. See the video at least. Why do you always mess up the outro? Wait, you can't do this challenge? Skill issue.